You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
All right, folks, we're going to tell you a little bit about your rights as a juror in this country. If you ever get called on to jury duty and manage to make it to trial, there's a little right you need to know about, and we got to tell it to you now before you get to trial, because if you get to trial, it's just too late. Let's unravel this just a little bit. There's a story I saw that floated across the news wires where an activist, and it wasn't a marijuana activist, this activist got sentenced, and he started serving on Thursday a 145-day jail sentence for passing out flyers at the courthouse about jury nullification. So I figured, hey, this is as good a reason as any for us to talk a little bit about this concept of jury nullification, which goes all the way back to the American colonies. In fact, it goes back to the British Empire even before that. And the idea is pretty simple. Juries have the right to not only determine the guilt or innocence of the defendant, but to judge the justice of the individual application of the law to that defendant, or the morality of the law in general. Now, the practice of juries nullifying verdicts dates all the way back to, pre-Civil War days. There used to be a Fugitive Slave Act. If you have a slave escaped from the South and ran up north and you harbored that fugitive slave, you could be prosecuted. But in the North, they had trouble getting juries to actually convict people of this because a lot of the Northerners were abolitionists who believed that slavery was evil. And even though there was a law against it, that we shouldn't punish people who are helping fugitive slaves. Back during the early 20th century, as temperance movements moved across the country and finally enacted alcohol prohibition, wet juries, and they used to call people who supported alcohol drinking wets. There was wets and dries. Wet juries also used to refuse to convict people for liquor law violations in a lot of states where they didn't really approve of alcohol prohibition. And even as recently as the 1960s and 70s, we had cases where juries were refusing to convict protesters of the Vietnam War, protesters who would, block trains that were trying to take bombs to the army bases and such. So the court, while they had to prove beyond a doubt that somebody might have hidden a slave or sold a beer or blocked a recruiting office or something like that, the jury could then decide that the defendant that broke that law was justified. He was justified hiding that slave because slavery is illegal, or that the law itself was just unjust, that we shouldn't convict people under this law because the law is wrong. And it's a right that every jury in America maintains to this day. It's a right that every American has as a juror. It's one of the most important rights we have. Our founding fathers wrote about this right as being the last bastion. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said it was the last bastion against the tyranny of the state, was the impartial citizen jury that could decide not just whether you're guilty of the law, but whether the law itself was just. So why is this such a new concept to some of you? Why are some of you listening to this rant going, huh? Jury nullification, never heard of that, right? Well, you know about the Miranda rights, right? You know about those. Why aren't we told about these jury rights that we have? Because in any situation where informing you of your jury rights makes sense, like at the courthouse or during the trial, it is illegal to inform you of that right. Yeah, you get the Miranda rights. You get arrested and the police have to say, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. You have the right to an attorney. And if you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you by the court, blah, 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 right? They give the whole Miranda warning, right? Because once you're arrested, your legal status changes. You're now a suspect in a crime, and we got to inform you of your basic level of rights, your right to counsel, your right to remain silent, because you're innocent until proven guilty in America. And we give you these warnings so you have some minimal level of awareness, right? So you have some level of protection against the state, which, has the judicial system and the cops and the guns and the money and the time, right? You got to have some level of protection. But if you're a juror, and you're trying to decide whether or not a particular suspect is guilty or innocent in court, you're not allowed to be informed of your rights under the Constitution as an arbiter of that law. You may only be aware of jury nullification if you learned about it anywhere else other than in or near a courtroom at a time not near that of the trial you're the juror for. So that's what I'm telling you now, folks, because by the time you're picked for jury duty, by the time you get into the courtroom, it's too late. We can't tell you about it. It's maddening, isn't it? Now, this is the case. The case is this fellow by the name of Mark Schmitter, and he's a jury nullification activist. He goes around lots of places and tries to inform people of their rights. He began serving a 145-day jail sentence last Thursday for passing out jury nullification flyers outside of a courthouse. According to the report, Vietnam-era veteran, peaceful freedom activist, and local small businessman Mark Schmitter has been jailed for 145 days by Judge Belvin Perry. Schmitter's sentence began Thursday after he was found guilty for distributing jury nullification info outside of Perry's self-imposed free speech zone during the Casey Anthony trial. Okay, so try and put aside any concerns that the goal here may have been to get Casey Anthony found not guilty of murdering her daughter through jury nullification, and she was acquitted of murder, manslaughter, and child abuse anyway. So let's just forget what the case was about. The point was he was trying to get jury nullification across to the people. The report continues. Mark E. Schmitter is an activist for jury rights whose story we covered 1 year ago. He was originally facing a year in jail after being found guilty of 2 felonies, external criminal contempt of court, and jury tampering for distributing information outside the Orange County Courthouse in Florida. Schmitter was found not guilty of any actual law, but of rules that were written by the judge at the time. The rules that he was in violation of were for demonstrating outside of a free speech zone that was determined by this judge. He was first arrested in June 2011, maintains his innocence, and says the judge's orders that he violated were a direct violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution. Later on, an appeals court agreed that the rule saying that you could have a free speech zone for the courthouse protesters was indeed wrong. However, they still said that passing out this literature, this particular literature, could be banned outside of the court. So yes, you have the free speech rights. Yes, you can protest in front of the courthouse, but there's just certain things you cannot say. And one thing you cannot say is that juries have the right to not convict for any reason they choose. You can't say that. Now, keeping this jury nullification power secret, this has been the law of the land since 1895, people. In 1895, the Supreme Court decided judges do not have to inform juries of their nullification right. So you're sitting on a jury, but the judge doesn't have to tell you that you don't have to find people guilty if you don't like the law. Right? They don't have to tell you that. In 1969, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals recognized the power of the jury to acquit regardless of the law and to not be punished for their verdicts. Okay? But they also decided that juries should not be directly informed of that right, lest they be enticed to nullification first before deciding the law. The idea here is, all right, jury, we got videotape of a guy holding 10 pounds of weed, and he signed a statement admitting that he had 10 pounds of weed, and there's 60 people testifying against him that says he has 10 pounds of weed. But you as a juror can decide that busting people for 10 pounds of weed is a bad idea, and you can vote to acquit. But there's a catch. Check this out. In 1972, the D.C. Circuit Court upheld that precedent about, not telling jurors about the nullification power, and further clarified that defense attorneys cannot inform the jurors of their rights to nullify a verdict. And in 1997, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals held that a juror could be removed from a jury if there's evidence that he or she intends to engage in jury nullification. So yeah, you can nullify the verdict. You can have the guy in front of you for 10 pounds of weed, and all other of the 11 jurors can say that he's guilty as sin. And you can say, no, this person's innocent. I will not convict this person. But you can only do that if you don't admit in any way that you're doing it because you don't like the law. If you say that you're doing it because you don't like the law, because you're intending to nullify the verdict, they can remove you from that jury for misconduct. It's a prosecutorial misconduct kind of thing, like a tampering kind of thing, right? So you have the right to let that guy go for his 10 pounds of weed, but only if you're letting him go out of good faith that you believe the government didn't prove its case, not because you're nullifying a law. In other words, it's almost like a thought crime, right? If you vote not to acquit, we can't punish you unless we can prove that you voted not to acquit for a specific reason, because you were upholding your right to nullify a verdict, and you let us know that you were doing that. So you can exercise the right so long as no one tells you what the right is, so long as the right remains secret, and so long as you do not indicate that you are using that right in any way, you're free to nullify a verdict. Is this madness or what? Now, if you want to learn more about this, I encourage you to go visit flexyourrights.org. They've got a page up on jury nullification. I think it's like jury-nullification, something like that on the URL. And I've got a link to it at radicalruss.com. They are making a film. They're proposing to make a film to train you about your rights and how to behave and how to act as far as getting on a jury. They made an excellent film, the Flex Your Rights, what was that called? Busted, the Guide to Surviving Police Encounters, that shows you how to survive a car stop, a street stop, and a house stop, a knock and talk from the cops. They made a follow-up video that emphasizes some of the realities, shall we say, of being black and having to go through those same situations. It's another great video from flexyourrights.org. This one they want to make for informing people about their jury rights. They still need some donations for that. To put together the budget they'll need. You can check out flexyourrights.org. I think this is an important project, because if you're like me, you didn't know you had these rights. I didn't know I had this jury right until I started getting involved with the marijuana movement. They don't teach you this stuff in school. They should, but they don't teach you this stuff in school. They don't teach you your Bill of Rights. They don't teach you how to deal with police officers. This is the kind of stuff where our activist community is actually providing the civic education that our American school system is so desperately failing to provide people. And I'm telling you, folks, if more people knew their rights and exercised their rights, if they all exercised their right to a jury trial, for example, if we stopped doing this plea bargain system, if we stopped relying on criminal informants, if we educated people about jury nullification, hell, this prohibition would have been over years ago. They can only keep us down if they keep us ignorant. And that's why we're here 5 days a week right here at 420radio.org, Russ Belville Show, bringing you the best education, information, and entertainment we can. Tell everyone you know, spread the word. We'll be here for you. That's all the time we got for Hour 1. We'll be back with Hour 2, more talk and your phone calls at 971-533-7111. For Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.